understanding and embracing my own depression and helping others to do the same has led me to question a lot of the beliefs that I was raised on and I believed myself, especially with how depression fits in a spiritual context. I was recently asked this question, which kind of illustrates where I was thinking up until very recently too. I was asked, you recently posted that depression should be understood as deep rest. This is so interesting and not a way I've looked at depression before, and it makes so much sense. But there are faith preachers who say that depression is a spiritual attack or even a generational curse. They cast it out of their own life and walked free. Do you think there's a difference between natural depression and an evil oppression and deception to be prayed against? And I really love this question because this was really where my mentality was at. I was raised to believe that depression was a spiritual thing. It was a deception, as this question suggests. It was a spiritual attack, and that the way through depression was faith. There was this willpower that you say, I will not be depressed, I will not be like this, and you cast it out of your life, and you say no. And I call it the resist and deny approach, and it has been pervasive through church for the last few decades. Resist and deny when it comes to any mental health issues. If you're suffering with depression, if you're suffering with anxiety, if you're suffering with insecurities, whatever your mental health issue is or your mental illness, it's a resist and deny. So you say, I will not feel like this, I will change, and you deny it. You say, I don't feel like this. And so I actually know people in my own life who are incapable of connecting with their own emotions, where they're at, and be able to articulate, I am feeling, I am suffering, and to be able to actually analyze their childhood traumas. For me, it comes down to the principle of being able to engage with deep contemplation. And people who are resisting and denying their own brain telling them that something is not right here, something's not okay, something isn't fitting, something isn't working in my life. People who are in this resist and deny because they've received this resist and deny theology from church are people who often struggle to engage in deep contemplation. Because as soon as you start to engage in deep contemplation, that is when all your childhood trauma will start to surface, all of your emotional issues will start to surface, your thoughts will turn very dark, and that is highlighting the shame that's been put on you as a child. Your thoughts will turn very fearful, and that is highlighting the areas where actually you're unreconciled with your own power and ability to control, and your sense of powerlessness and the things that you can't control. And the balance between those two. There's so many things that psychologically as humans we have to engage with and process, and there is a lot of damage that gets done to all of us as we're growing up. No parent is perfect, and so all of us receive mixed messages or even harmful or wrong messages which change the way we feel we're able to perceive the world, trust our instincts, and operate within the world. This lack of being able to connect with our own emotions, with our own thoughts, with our own intuition, being able to understand what we need, what we're feeling, and what we need in any given moment is what will lead to mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and a whole host of other issues. And so actually the resist and deny approach, I think, has done a lot of damage, and it did a lot of damage to me too. I would say that I was ashamed and unable to engage with my pain. Rather than trying to figure out where is this depression coming from, we've talked about this before, that depression is rooted in something. It's a symptom, not a condition. And you need to explore your own psyche in this deep contemplation with God to find where is the root of this pain. And it will probably be way back in your history. And so when I was fearing depression, so I was ashamed and fearing the experience of being depressed rather than embracing it as my body's way of telling me that something wasn't right, of my own brain's wisdom saying, hang on, there are inconsistencies and incompatibilities in the way that you're thinking and believing, which means that I couldn't live free and I couldn't live as myself. I needed to embrace depression as a gift and explore the root of where that depression was. And as I've done that, and it took me a long time to get there because I was actually struggling to find anyone who was giving me this kind of advice. And it's because this resist and deny theology has been so prevalent in church for the last few decades. So I was struggling to find anyone who was saying, go. Well, actually, my husband was the only one who was saying, this is good, this is God, go with it. It's not always going to feel like this. See where this road will lead, engage with this. And if I hadn't have had him in my life saying that, I'm not really sure what would have ended up happening to me. And so somebody who's in that place of depression, the last thing they need is a resist and deny theology. They actually need someone to say, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is working just fine. Let's explore where this depression is coming from, because it means there's a new level of freedom for you and a new level of control that you haven't had so far in your life. So this feeling of feeling ashamed of my own experience and my own emotions was the thing that was stopping me from exploring my own traumas and the inconsistencies in my mind that were keeping me enslaved. And because I was resisting and denying my experience, I was impatient with other people, with their mental health issues. And I look back now and I cringe at how harsh I was with people who were suffering with mental health issues. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, you just get over it. You're not being strong enough. I've had faith. And I actually had people say this to me when I was suffering with depression. They literally said, and I quote, there is no such thing as depression. I've had times when I'm feeling low and I just speak faith to myself. And that in its definition is shame. You're shaming a person, saying there's something wrong with you. You're not doing life as well as I am doing life. Look at how strong I am. I've been able to overcome my mental issues and you need to too. And I think when you've got a situation where the only two possible outcomes from a theology is pride, look at me and how well I'm controlling my emotions, don't you want to be like me, which was what I was receiving from some people, or fear, I'm failing, I'm not doing this well enough, the devil is winning, he's controlling my mind and I need to break free somehow. And so when you've got these two options, pride or fear or shame, I think that cannot be healthy. I don't care how right it sounds. It may sound as a theology. If that's what it's producing in people's life, the potential to be proud that they have overcome, or the potential to be afraid or ashamed, that is the old world order. That is toxic, and that is exactly what Jesus has come to show us, a new way of living. We're to live in life and freedom. Life and freedom, fear and shame can never coexist. Neither can resting and running. And so when we talk about depression being deep rest, that you need to just step back, slow life down and figure out what is going on in your head. A lot of the times, like people who are committing suicide, they're not wanting to not live anymore. They're wanting to not live their life. So what is wrong with their life that makes it so unbearable? There are things in their life that are making it unlivable. And the depression is telling them, you need to figure this out. You need to stop. You need to resist. You need to say, no, I don't want to live like that anymore. And not giving people the freedom to actually find the actual thing that they need to resist, because their emotion is not the thing that they need to resist. It's the external oppression. It's the internal thoughts that say you're not allowed to be free, you're not allowed to be yourself. Those are the things that we need to resist. And so we need to give people permission and freedom to do that deep contemplation and find that new level of freedom that is going to be theirs. So I think what's really interesting to note is that up until very recently, there hasn't been much exploration or research done into emotions. So there was a book written by a guy called Daniel Goleman. This was written in 1996. And so this is pretty recent. And this is considered, I believe, one of the first authority pieces on emotions, emotional intelligence, the importance of emotions and how to understand and utilize emotions. And he says himself, the reason why it took so long to even have a book like this, we didn't have anything like this before. He said, I've had to wait till now before the scientific harvest was full enough to write this book. These insights were so late in coming, largely because the place of feeling in mental life has been surprisingly slighted by research over the years, leaving the emotions a largely unexplored continent for scientific psychology. Into this void has rushed a welter of self-help books, well-intentioned advice based on, at best, clinical opinion, but lacking much, if any, scientific basis. Now science is finally able to speak with authority to these urgent and perplexing questions of the psyche at its most irrational, to map with some precision the human heart. If you want to understand more about emotional intelligence and how to actually embrace your emotions and allow them to guide you rather than fear and resist them and feel ashamed of them, this is a really good book to start with. It is a little bit heavy because it's based on a lot of scientific research, but it's absolutely fantastic. But I just think that there was, up until this point, that book was in 1996, up until then people didn't really know what to do with mental health issues. They didn't know what to do with people who were experiencing, irrational and uncontrollable emotions. Their kind of take on it was to just, resist and deny. So they just say, just try and fix them, just try and fix them. And they were even giving people partial lobotomies, trying to stop their brain from being anxious, from being depressed, from being neurotic. And of course it didn't work. It just made people numb because you're cutting out their ability to feel and use their intuition. And so it wasn't working. To me, it's no surprise that the church's resist and deny theology that has been pervasive for the last few decades was actually just mirroring the secular understanding of emotions and mental health issues at the time. There was this fear it, fight it, cut it out like cancer approach to mental health issues. So in the secular world, you've got people having partial lobotomies. In a spiritual world, you've got people saying you just have to cast it out. It's a demon, it's a spiritual oppression, you just have to cast it out. So it's the same thing, but just in a different packet. You're fearing it, fighting it, and trying to cut it out like cancer. As this, Daniel Goleman goes on to explain, we're starting to understand now how the human psyche works, how emotions work, and how important they are. You can't just fear it, fight it, and try and cut it out like cancer. You've got to understand it and allow it to guide you into your, what they call emotional intelligence, that you're actually able to discern the world around you and sense things that maybe on a purely intellectual level you wouldn't have recognized, but something in you, an instinct goes, oh, that's not right. And your ability to connect with that instinct that goes, oh, yeah, that's not, essentially is your discernment saying that's not life, that's not peace, that's not freedom. And your ability to discern that's not life, that's not freedom, that's not peace, and to actually choose to live another way is so important. And I believe that's the thing that we need to encourage people to do, is to develop this gift of discernment rather than fearing their emotions and just feeling like they're failing. And that's the thing that I just don't want people to feel like they're failing, because I felt like I was failing. And I think the thing is, we're understanding now that a lot of emotional issues, anxiety, depression, are actually rooted in childhood conditioning, in trauma, and in a lack of freedom to be our own self, to know ourselves and to be ourselves without fear. And that's actually where a lot of our mental health issues are coming from. And so again, we just need to help people to identify and connect with that. So for me, I was very much raised on the philosophy of take your thoughts captive, which basically meant if you're feeling emotional, then the devil is controlling your thoughts, and you need to take your thoughts captive, which means stop thinking about that thing and say something pleasant to yourself so that you won't feel emotional anymore. And I definitely had a lot of people saying this to me when I was depressed. They were saying, almost like panicky. They're saying, oh, take your thoughts captive, when I'm starting to get emotional. The problem for me was that I was taking the wrong thoughts captive. The things that were actually trying to lead me into life and peace and freedom, I thought was sinful. And the things that were actually this resist and deny approach, saying, well, there's something wrong with my brain, there's something wrong with the way my emotions are working, and I just, I obviously just need deliverance, I need, to just pray and cast this out and it needs to go away. That was actually the thing that was keeping me entrapped. and keeping me miserable. I mean, like, it's so messed up. And I know that so many people are in exactly the same place. We have got to get good at this as a church, as Christians, and as a society, understanding emotions and emotional health, giving people freedom without fear and without shame to explore their own psyche, explore their own emotions, explore their own intuition, and therefore find the road to life and peace, not fear and shame, which is what the resist and deny approach does with people. I know people who have followed these faith preachers who preach this kind of thing, and there are a lot of them, and they've been going for a long time. And some of them are the most emotionally stunted people that I know. They haven't been able to engage in their childhood traumas. They are still riddled with fear and anxieties, and it overflows into every area of their life. And yet they're trying to live a good Christian life. They're trying to speak out in faith. They're trying to never say anything negative, trying to always be positive, trying to never feel emotional. And all it's done is stop them from doing the road of healing and deep contemplation into their own pains and wounds, and find the new way to live that is peace and freedom. So I don't really feel like I'm in a place to say, depression is never a spiritual oppression. It's never like, a generational curse. I don't know. I'm just not an authority on life and everything spiritual. What I am saying is that the resist and deny approach has done a lot of people a lot of damage and created a lot of fear and shame around mental health issues, which I believe are always leading to traumas and a new way of living. So my suggestion is, why don't we try looking at the research, looking at the science, understanding emotions, understanding how the role that mental health issues play in helping a person to find their new level of freedom, explore that, encourage that, take all the shame and the fear of mental health issues for the next few decades. We've had a few decades of trying the resist and deny approach. Why don't we have the next few decades of trying actually a caring therapeutic approach, not praying that people will be delivered from depression, but praying that they will understand depression, letting them know that there's nothing wrong with them. This is a really important and really healthy part of their human experience, allowing them to do that deep contemplation without fearing the emotions that are being triggered by that, and see where we get to in the next 20 or 30 years, how healthy spiritually and emotionally society and the members of the church look. And then we can make our decision about whether it's actually healthy to have depression and it is actually a need for deep rest, or whether there is a spiritual element that actually we just need to resist and deny and cast out, and people will be automatically healed. So I'm not the authority on it. That's just been my experience and my take on it. So I hope that's been helpful and maybe given you some things to think about as well.